The latest drop of the Twitter files comes from the journalist Alex Berenson. Now, I've had Alex on the show some months ago now, and Alex has been focused on science reporting and of late specifically on reporting about COVID. And what's kind of interesting about these Twitter files is that the Twitter files involve Alex himself, so it's particularly appropriate that he be the one to blow the whistle on it. And I think Elon Musk is being very clever, very strategic. Matt Taibbi, Barry Weiss, and now Alex Berenson. There have been a couple of others as well. Now, this story begins with a guy named Scott Gottlieb. And Scott Gottlieb is a director of Pfizer, the medical company. And he's kind of a big name on Twitter. He has about 550,000 Twitter followers. In any event, it turns out that he sees a tweet, Gottlieb does, and he goes, whoa, this is a tweet that may not be good for Pfizer. This is a tweet that might hurt Pfizer mRNA vaccine sales. And the tweet was from, it wasn't from some activist, wasn't from Robert F. Kennedy Jr., wasn't even from Berenson. It was from Dr. Brett Giroir, a physician who also had been himself, as Gottlieb was, head of the Food and Drug Administration. And the tweet was not an anti-vaxxing tweet. In fact, it ended by saying, get vaccinated. But the tweet went on to say, hey, listen, it says that the immunity that you get from the vaccine may not be as great as natural immunity. In fact, natural immunity provides more protection than vaccine immunity. Now, this is, in fact, an accurate statement by Dr. Giroir. And in fact, the doctor cited a prominent study, a peer-reviewed study, that showed this. So it wasn't just that he was claiming it, it was that he was documenting it. And it's not even that Scott Gottlieb disagreed with him. Scott Gottlieb agreed that the factual statement being made was true. And yet, Gottlieb, by the way, as I mentioned, former FDA commissioner, he's even today a prominent contributor on places like MSNBC, CNBC, and he's, as I mentioned, a senior board member of Pfizer. In fact, not just an ordinary board member. He sits sort of on their central committee that reviews vaccines and other such topics. In any event, what Gottlieb does is he recognizes that Pfizer, which, by the way, had about $81 billion of sales in 2021, out of which half of that money came from one source. You guessed it, the vaccine. So this is big money for Pfizer. And by the way, Gottlieb receives himself big money for Pfizer. So what does he do? He emails Todd O'Boyle, a top lobbyist in the Twitter Washington office, and he says the post is, quote, corrosive. Notice, not inaccurate, but corrosive. Why? Because he says, quote, if it ends up going viral, he worries that it will, quote, end up going viral and driving news coverage. So Twitter takes a look at it, and they basically say, hey, listen, it doesn't violate our rules. In fact, the tweet appears to be accurate, and yet Twitter ends up flagging the tweet, putting warning tags on it, which are themselves misleading. This tweet is misleading tag, and prevents people from seeing the tweet. And it's tagged even now, even though there have been multiple studies that have come out since the tweet confirming the accuracy of the tweet. Now, about a week later, Gottlieb strikes again. And he goes back to Twitter and he complains about a tweet from a guy named Justin Hart. Now, Justin Hart is one of these guys who's kind of you could call him a COVID vaccine skeptic, but he has 100,000 followers on Twitter. And basically what Hart says is that you don't need these vaccines to be administered to children. The mortality rate for children in dying from COVID is extremely low. Whoop-de-doo. Accurate statement. To whether children need or don't need vaccines is a point of view, but there's a reasonable basis for thinking that children need these vaccines much less than anyone else. And yet, This is the key. And yet, Gottlieb knows that that Pfizer is pushing vaccines on children. And again, a big money maker for Pfizer. In fact, very soon the Pfizer shot would be approved for children 5 to 11. And this is a huge new market for Pfizer. If parents can be convinced that their children need to, they can get COVID, they need to have a shot. And so sure enough, here is Gottlieb telling Twitter that, quote, former FDA commissioner Gottlieb, this is Twitter's internal communications. They're saying former FDA commissioner Gottlieb thinks that this tweet is a problem. Now, they don't say Pfizer board member Gottlieb thinks this is a problem because, of course, the Twitter people will go, well, yeah, obviously he thinks so because money is flowing into his pocket, money is flowing into Pfizer's pockets. And so what does Twitter do? They take a look at it. Now, in this case, they don't respond, but they don't in fact ban this particular tweet. But Gottlieb is not to be deterred. He now takes on Alex Berenson, goes after him. And by the way, what we're seeing here is a kind of a coordination network. You've got people like Gottlieb, formerly in the government, now working for Pfizer, working in tandem with people like people in the Biden White House, people like Andrew Slavitt. And so you have you could almost call it a public-private collaboration. It involves the government. It involves people who migrate inside and outside of government. It involves think tanks. It involves nonprofit foundations. And so this is the censorship regime. As I mentioned before, it exists with Meta or Facebook. It exists with YouTube. The only place it's being exposed is Twitter. Now, Alex Berenson says he's going to file a lawsuit over this. And I think this kind of thing is really important because we need the courts, and specifically the Supreme Court, to look at this massive collaboration, this public-private collaboration epitomized by people like Gottlieb to suppress our right to free speech.